The load and spot rate numbers exploded and had huge increases year over year, but numbers can be somewhat deceiving. We'll cover the year over year numbers and try to drill down just a little bit deeper and look at comparable weeks accounting for the Thanksgiving holidays. As we close in on the year-end holidays, we find ourselves asking, what is it that your loved ones may want for Christmas? Well, what about drivers? What do they want? What can help fleets attract and retain drivers? We'll take a look at the data and find out. Plus, we talked to Jason Miller one final time for 2025 to get his latest take on the economy and find out what he thinks we're in for as we approach 2026. All that and more straight ahead. For Randall Reilly, I'm Joshua Miller, and this is the 30-Day Reset. Welcome back to another edition of the 30-Day Reset. We're back each and every month with all the latest spot rate, freight, recruiting, and economic data. We cover a lot here on the show, but we just don't have time to get it all in the actual video. So if you want to take a deeper dive on any of the things we discuss here on the show, any of the numbers you see behind us, or even more, you can get your hands on the data we cover, plus that extra stuff, with this month's edition of the 30-Day Reset download. And that's available for free down below in the description on YouTube or just below the video player if you happen to be watching us over on randallreilly.com. Now, we got a lot to cover today, and it is our last reset of 2025, so let's get right to it. First up, it's Trucking by the Numbers, brought to you by Stratas. It seems that both companies and the drivers themselves are putting less and less effort into searching for and hiring for jobs, respectively. The big reason at the moment is, of course, seasonality. We're smack dab in the middle of the end of the year holiday season. Thanksgiving is already in the rear view, and we're rapidly closing in on Christmas and 2026. So many on both sides of the hiring equation have, not surprisingly, decided to just kind of wait it out and see what happens in the new year. Search activity for driving jobs fell 9% in November. Posting activity was also down by 9%, with a 6% drop in job seekers. Now again, we do expect both the effort in searching for drivers and the intent and activity from drivers looking for jobs to tick back up once we get into January of 2026. Now, the silver lining in this is if you are still looking for drivers right now, those drivers who are still looking, well, they have a high intent. So if you can get their attention, you may still be able to get the hire you're after. But you do need to move quickly because, as I mentioned, once we hit January, that competition for drivers is going to be ramping back up. Taking a look at load and spot rate numbers for the month, we do have increases pretty much across the board. Total load volume, total spot rates, and load and rates by segment, well, they all shot up dramatically. For instance, total load volume was up 160% year over year. But don't get too excited because while the numbers were indeed up across the board, they weren't up as much as it appears at first glance. Week 48 of last year fell on Thanksgiving week, so comparing week 48 from 2025 to 2024, well, it provides some pretty skewed data. But even when we try to even things out and directly compare the weeks following Thanksgiving from both years, we do still see increases. Just not as impressive as the technical year-over-year totals. Using the week after Thanksgiving metric, we see load volume up 26% and overall spot rates up 4%. By segment, dry van loads were up 22% and rates were up 5%. Refrigerated loads rose a little under 1% while the rates were up by 12%. And flatbed loads increased by 41% with the spot rates rising 3.6%. And again, all those gains were from comparing the weeks that directly followed Thanksgiving in 2024 and in 2025 in an effort to provide a more accurate comparison. For more, refer to this month's download, which is again available down below. Now let's talk about this month's news story. Our friends over at Truckers News love a good survey, and they recently asked drivers, why do you think fleets are having a hard time finding drivers today? The number one response? You guessed it. Pay was the top response, with 37% saying that's the main reason fleets are having a hard time finding drivers. Which in and of itself, well, that's not too surprising because, hey, who doesn't want to get paid more? And we all know that pay has long been a leading, if not the leading gripe that drivers have for fleets. What is a little surprising, however, is that according to the ATRI, driver pay is already the leading expense for fleets, outpacing all other operational costs by a pretty good bit, too. The industry average, according to their survey on critical issues in the trucking industry, was $32.10 per hour. Aside from pay, some other top responses were fleets don't respect the drivers or treat them as part of the team, poor driver support with shippers and/or the law, not enough home time, and no career path. Now, when it comes to retention, Here were some of the top responses when Truckers News asked, why do you think fleets are having a hard time retaining drivers today? And once again, pay was first. Many of the responses are pretty much what you'd think they'd be, but interestingly, the percentages for the responses did seem to shift a little bit. For instance, for finding drivers, 37% responded with pay, while only 30% said pay when it came to retention. 20% said respect was an issue in finding drivers, but nearly 10% more than that said respect was a major issue with retention. So many of the same issues pop up over and over, but depending on where the driver is at in their experience with you and your fleet, they may value and care about different things. If you'd like more on that, you can check out the full write-up over on truckersnews.com. Link to the full story down below. Now let's check in with Jason Miller for his final 2025 economic update.
Welcome everyone to our December trucking market update. Kicking things off as we usually do. Dry van spot truckload rates for November edged up a couple cents per mile according to DAT. But when we look at it kind of from a historical perspective, it's still way too early to get excited yet. We're still kind of moving along the bottom of a trough that we've been at since about Q2 of 2023 once we removed fuel. And just to kind of set everybody's expectations correct for December, we should be seeing at least a 7 to 8 cent per mile increase in that implied line haul rate from DAT. So that's kind of the baseline that we're going against as we start to see whether this December sees tightening that is more or less versus seasonality. So in other words, don't get excited if you see spot rates go up 5 cents a mile. They actually should be going up at least 8 cents a mile based on historical, precedents. Now, when we start getting around to forecast where are we likely to be at in the start of 2026, my general sense is we're actually starting the year from a freight demand standpoint at a weaker position than what we were in the start of 2025. That shows up very clearly in new order data from both the Institute for Supply Management and various Federal Reserve Board banks that I compile together. What you'll see is we were seeing new orders were on a nice upward tick in January of 2025. They dropped down due to a lot of the policy uncertainty. And we really haven't seen them rebound yet substantially. And so this has been historically one of the best leading indicators of where truckload rates are going to move. And the key thing is I'm not yet seeing those signs of new orders coming in that would get me that excited about where demand is going to be over the coming months. Hopefully this improves, but we just haven't seen signs of that yet. Now, I'm always talking about manufacturing as the primary source of trucking freight demand, and it is. And one of the things that came out with some benchmarking the Federal Reserve does is, unfortunately, manufacturing output has fallen substantially more since 2022 than we realized. But really drilling down and thinking freight-intensive sectors, what I've done here is I've removed high-tech products like computers, aerospace, and pharmaceuticals, and then lastly, tobacco products, because they don't really account for that much freight, but they have a disproportionate impact on how the Federal Reserve measures manufacturing output. And the big takeaway is that our output right now is about 4.6% below where it was in 2019 from manufacturing plants, believe it or not. Now, overall freight activity is at the same level as it is in 2019, and that's primarily due to more activity from wholesalers and retailers, essentially counterbalancing this. But the point is, we are digging ourselves out of a pretty big ditch. We never really got back even to 2019 levels of output based on this measure, even in the last peak, which was in the first quarter of 2022. And just kind of illustrating some of the challenges, what I've done here is shown physical unit output for household appliance manufacturers. This is your Whirlpools as an example. And what we see in terms of output was steady increase from 2014 through about 2017, and then about flat over that period from 17 through 19. Big explosion with the COVID pandemic. So output got about 13% higher at the peak than what it was before COVID, and that was in early 2021. But then when the housing market cooled very substantially in 2022 and inflation was at 8-9%, you started to see consumers really dial down those purchases. And what we've seen essentially is output stuck about 10% below where it was in that sort of 2017 through 2019 period. And the point being, this takes the housing market to unlock itself till people are buying more appliances and things like that. That is going to take a while to occur. This isn't going to be a switch being flipped. That leads me to conclude that basically the earliest we could see a meaningful change in market conditions in carriers' favor is going to be the second quarter of next year, and that is assuming things go right. So I think when the market shift eventually occurs, it will be much more gradual than the last two cycles. It'll feel a lot more like 2014 than it did 17 and 18, and certainly nothing like it did in 2020. So with that, that wraps up our December market cycle update. Everybody have a wonderful Christmas holiday break, and we'll see you on the other side of the new year.
Thanks so much for that, Jason. As always, we really do appreciate your time and expertise. And with that final update from Jason, it brings us to the end of our final 30-day reset for 2025. We hope the information has been useful to you, and don't forget to download your copy of it and everything we went over today in this month's download, once again available down below. You can also find a contact or consultation link down there, as well as links for our RPO team, Stratas, and our brand new Stratas agent. If you need any help or would like any information about any of that stuff or anything else really, don't hesitate to let us know. We'll be back next month for the first 30-day reset of 2026. And just as a little bit of a heads up, it may be a little bit later than normal, as it does usually take a little more time to gather all that information and data coming back from Christmas and New Year's. But never fear, we will be back. Until then, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thanks for watching.